Okay, so let's go into axial musculature. Let's go full screen. All right. So I don't know if I'm going to do this in 2 separate lectures or 1. We'll just see how far we get. So we're dealing with the axial musculature, not the appendicular, not the stuff that moves the limbs, but this is on the axis of the body. So let's just start on the head here, and let's start up here. Frontal belly of the Occipital Frontalis. That's the new name. I think it's a little bulky. I use the old name, which is just Frontalis. So this muscle, if I point at that and go, what muscle is this? You go Frontalis. And we'll go into origins, actions, and insertions a little bit. But mainly we're just naming muscles right now. Okay. Yeah, this is going to lift your eyebrows up. So that would be the action. The origin, where it originates, would be back here on what they call the Epicranial Aponeurosis. Remember, that's a broad, flat tendinous sheath, and aponeurosis is epicranial, above the cranium. All right. On the side here, by the temporal bone, temporalis, that actually helps you chew. So that's going to be called what they call a muscle of mastication, C-A-T-I-O-N. So these, like the Frontalis and the Orbicularis or Orbicularis Oris, Zygomaticus major and minor, those are muscles of facial expression. So facial expression, obviously controls your expression, where mastication, that controls chewing or moving the mandible. Okay, so this masseter, it elevates the mandible, as does the temporalis. So elevates the mandible so you can chew your food, where this platysma lowers the mandible. So those 3, if I say name 3 muscles of mastication, you would go temporalis, masseter, platysma. There's some others, but for us, that's enough for now. Let's look at what's going to make you smile. Zygomaticus major and minor. They run pretty close together, and they're going to pull the corners of the mouth upwards. So where they originating would be the zygomatic bone. So I love it when they name something like the Zygomaticus major. You it has something to do with the zygomatic bone, right? Remember, we use these words over and over again. Bony bones, bony landmarks, areas of the body. A lot of stuff is named after these type things. So it makes it kind of easy. All right. Oh, another little thing. So this is the minor, Zygomaticus minor. That's the Zygomaticus major. It's not a hard and fast rule, but on the axial musculature, if you have a minor and a major, the minor is generally superior. So the minors are on top. That's not 100% true. I'll show you an exception to that in a little bit. All right, here's the Orbicularis Oris. Oris being the oral region, right? Remember that from test 1. Then we have the buccinator. I've also heard it called buccinator and buccinator. I say buccinator. That one compresses the cheeks. Okay, there's one on each side. You just can't see it over here. This is superficial. They peel some of the muscles away over here, and this is deep, right, on this side. A lot of times they do that on these anatomy charts, so you can see what's out, towards you, and then what's deeper. Okay. That one in Latin, if I remember right, it means trumpeter. So you use it to play the trumpet. It compresses the cheeks. Okay. Depressor anguli or anguli, I've heard it pronounced both ways. Oris, just spell it right. That is going to cause you to frown. Okay. So it's going to pull the corners of the mouth. downwards. Okay, so there's those. Okay, the risorius. See the little risorius right there? It's tiny and it's kind of floating. Remember I said not all skeletal muscle is connected to the skeleton? Well, here's an example. It's inserting on the corner of the mouth. It's originating from just this connective tissue over the masseter, this fascia back here. And so it's not really connected to a bone, right? Even though it's skeletal muscle, right? I have pointed at this corrugator supercilii a couple of times just as a bonus. That'll help knit your brows together. This Orbicularis oculi, you're going to close the eyelids with that. All right, and then here's one, Sternocleidomastoid. This, you got one underneath your platysma here, right? But you can't see it on this side. So if you activated both your sternocleidomastoids, it's going to flex your neck, right? Whereas if you just did one side, you're going to get some lateral flexion, maybe even a little rotation. I generally don't put that. I keep your actions fairly simple on the test. So I'd go, you activate both of your sternocleidomastoids at the same time. What action occurs? Then you go flex the neck, right? All right. Now, I love it when they name stuff like this. Sterno. So this head's hooked to the sternum. Cleido, which means clavicle. This head's hooked to the clavicle. And so this is your origin. This is stable. And then it's going up here. You can't see where it's hooking on, but obviously it's going to the mastoid process. Remember that on the temporal bone? So that would be the insertion. So I love it. You know, the name itself tells you everything it's hooked to. It's really cool. Okay. And here you can see it a little better. Sternocleidomastoid. You can see they pull the platysma down. By the way, in real, you know, cadaver courses, you know, where you're dissecting, like in the advanced dissection course in human anatomy, that's one of the first things to go when you're looking at muscles. You get rid of the platysma because it's just in the way. So you rarely see it on most cadavers, and even on the charts, they're usually gone. This is unusual to have this here because usually they have them peeled back so that you can see everything under it. They do that in real life too, in the cadaver classes. All right, I'm probably not going to point at this little temporoparaitalis here. So if I'm pointing right here, don't overthink it on a model R chart. I'm just pointing at temporalis. Okay. Here you can see the Orbicularis Oris from another angle, and you look back here and you see Occipitalis. I call it the Occipitalis. Your book is now calling it the occipital belly of the Occipitofrontalis. So in other words, they're calling all of this one muscle now, the Occipitofrontalis. And so this would be the occipital belly, and that would be the frontal belly of the Occipitofrontalis. That's too much writing, right? So on your test, if I point at that, if you go occipitalis, that's fine. If you go frontalis over here, that's fine. Up here, you can go epicranial aponeurosis. By the way, the old name for that was Linea Aponeurotica. It's in your book, but nobody hardly uses that anymore. Galea, if I remember right, is from it's like the helmets that the old Roman soldiers used to wear. I think that's what that means. There's your masseter. You can really see it. You know, it's originating up here off the zygomatic arch, and it's inserting down here on the mandible, on this lower region of the mandible right here. And if you look, it's pretty much the same width all the way down. It's pretty. It doesn't. The insertion's not narrow like insertions normally are, because you look here, the insertion is narrow. The same thing. You see how this is kind of broad and it narrows down. It's not 100% true, right? You don't always have that effect, but a lot of times you do. But here, this one is pretty much the same width. all the way up and down. What's the action? Elevate the mandible. What's the origin? Zygomatic arch. What's the insertion? Mandible. What's the action? Like we said, elevate the mandible. Don't just say chewing, because chewing, basically, you're going up and down, right? So go elevate the mandible. Where platysma lowers or depresses the mandible, okay? And by the way, that platysma is not very strong. Gravity does most of that, probably. And you can even see that on, like, remember the crocodile hunter? He could jump on the back of a crocodile and he could just hold their snout shut. And that's because their platysma is just not very strong, just like ours is not very strong. Masseter, that's a different ball of wax. Those are very strong, especially on crocodiles and alligators, right? That's a very strong muscle. Okay, there's your Zygomaticus major, Zygomaticus minor. There's your buccinator or buccinator. I say buccinator. Okay, Orbicularis Oris. So that's just a bunch of good drawings. All right, so let's look at the eye. So we're still on axial, right? So the eye has these 6 muscles around it, and 4 of them are rather easy to learn. So let's look at it from the front here. So this is the nose would be over here. So this would be the medial rectus. That would be the lateral rectus. Let's look at that. So there's the nose, right? And this is the outside, so this would be the lateral rectus. Can't really see the medial rectus in this drawing, but you can see the superior rectus and the inferior rectus. What does rectus mean? It just means straight, right? So those are going straight back. Okay, and the motions are very straightforward on these. Superior rectus makes you look up. The lateral rectus makes you look to the outside. Inferior rectus makes you look down, and the medial rectus makes you look towards the midline, right? So those are, the actions are just so straightforward. Here's the 2 you got to be careful of. See this superior oblique? Remember, oblique means angle, basically cutting across at an angle. It's going through this little loop right here, and then it's going back to this part of the eye. So when this contracts, it's going to pull that. It's kind of hard to show on a 2-dimensional thing, but it's going to make your eye look down, and it's also going to make it look out. So down and out. So what's the action of this? And if you go down and out, I'm going to give it to you. Probably be better for you to go inferiorly and laterally, but I don't care. Down and out's fine on the test. Inferior oblique, because of the way it's hooked up, it's going to make you look up and out. Now, there with both of those muscles, superior and inferior oblique, you may get a little bit of rotation of the eye. I don't care about that. Just go down and out, up and out. I'm happy. Okay, so you can see the superior oblique going through the little trochlea, they call it, the trochlea. And we've seen that word before. I think it means like pulley or something along those lines. But by the way, remember that word. There's the trochlea again. Remember that word, because when we get to neuro, we're talking about some cranial nerves, and one of them actually goes to this superior oblique muscle. And it's cranial nerve 4. And guess what the name of it is? A trochlear nerve. Probably named after this little guy right here. So, thinking ahead, you know, in neuro, I could go, you activate the trochlear nerve. What happens? And you go, oh, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna make this muscle contract, so it's gonna make you look down and out with that eye. Okay, so just start trying to put things together like that. All right, so we're good with those. Superior rectus, lateral rectus, medial rectus, inferior rectus. Sometimes, usually about this time, I'll get a question from a student, and they'll go, well, what makes you look up and in? I've seen, you know, like little kids love to do that. They'll cross their eyes. They think that's funny. And it'll pull the eyes in and up. And the way that's probably happening in most of them, these fascicles, this is a pretty wide muscle. You see this superior rectus, and little kids, some adults too, We kind of tend to lose it as you get older. They can control individual fascicles. So the kids can just activate these fascicles on this side, and it's going to pull your eye up, but it's also going to pull it to the inside. So that's how that works. All right, we're going on down. So this is Erector Spiny group. Okay, so the Erector Spiny group, it's 3 muscles. They're not showing them over here. Remember, this is deep. This is more superficial over here. So if I drew a circle around these 3, like this right here, the Erector Spiny group, what do? Well, it's in the name. They erect the spine. Well, especially if you got both groups. You know, you got one over here on this side. You activate them both at the same time, it's going to make you stand up straight. Okay? If you do just one side, you know, of your Rectus Spinis, you're going to do lateral flexion, so you're going to bend to the side. Probably still erect it some too. The torso. So that's a muscle, that's a muscle, and that's a muscle. So remember this the first letters, S, L, and I. So this is called the spinalis, this is the longissimus, and this is the iliocostalis. Costal means ribs, right? So spinalis, longissimus, and iliocostalis. Now, you notice the way it has in here thoracis or lumborum or whatever. Don't stress on that. That's just these are long muscles. They cover a lot of territory. So if you're in the thoracic region, they call this one the iliocostalis thoracis or whatever. You know, so I'm not getting that picky, right? Just get the first letter, right? So if I point there, you go spinalis. If I point there, you go longissimus. It's long. And then you point here, you go iliocostalis. You don't have to give me what region they're in, like the lumbar or the thoracic. Don't worry about that. Now over here, that's your quadratus lumborum, and this would be the multifidus. I can point at these. I think they're in your lab book. I've generally done them like a bonus. Just remember this is deep to this, and we'll worry about actions on later. Okay, so sometimes I go A, B, C. Now I've run out of things to point at, and I go, okay, D, right, or D. Okay, so just put especially if they're in your lab book, make sure you write these down. I think they included them last semester as far as fair game. So quadratus lumborum here, okay, multifidus there. Make sure you spell them right. Now then, we're going to zoom in on the backbone, right? I love it when they name stuff like this. These are your transverse processes, right? Transverse processes, okay? So going in between there, it's going to be Transverse serii, these muscles. I think that's plural when you go I. Interspinalis is in between your spinous processes. Okay. Only good place I have to show them, pretty much, since we're not in the lab. I think on our torso model, you can see some intertransverse serii on 2 or 3 of these spaces right here. But we're not in the lab. This is all going to be pictures, basically. I'll see if I got a picture of the torso model where I can show you. Intertransverse serii, interspinalis. And so obviously if I activate these interspinalis, it's going to help you stand up straight. Same thing here if you activate both sides, but if you just do one, it's going to do some of that lateral flexion if you just do one side. Okay. Alrighty. We're still on axial musculature, right? Notice we're not talking about any of these muscles because these move whatever, the humerus or you know, something appendicular. We're sticking with axial, right? So look at these, see these fascicles coming across this way? This is very external right here. They got it peeled up over here. So this is the external oblique, right? And of course, you got one over here, so you got, two. You got external obliques. Whoop. So the external oblique. So if I just poke a pin right there, or a pointer, and you see those fascicles, see the way they're running this direction, kind of like if it was both of them together, it would look like a V, right? That would be your external obliques. Peel that up, and then you see the fascicles. They didn't draw it that great, but they're running more like an A frame, so they would be running in that direction. But they fade out right here, so it stops right here. But so they're running in that direction. Okay? That's the internal oblique. Okay, and then you pull that up, and then these guys are just running. These fascicles are just running straight across like this. So that's the Transverse Abdominis. This is the Rectus Abdominis. It's covered over with some of this sheath right here. Rectus Abdominis. Where this white line, by the way, it's got its own name. I don't know if it's on here. Yeah, it is. Linea Alba. Linea means line. Alba means white. And I could show it here. Here you cut across. Horizontal. And it's kind of nice because you can see, oh, external oblique, internal oblique, transversus abdominis. So if you stuck a needle through here, that's the order you would go through, right, before you got into this cavity. Now, notice the way these fade out. They do not cover over the rectus abdominis, so they fade out. See, like right here. That's why if you go to the gym and you really do a lot of crunches and work out, you can get what they call a 6-pack, right, or an 8-pack, or I've even heard of, say, 10 packs. But that's because you have these little delineations of connective tissue here. But this is your rectus abdominis. But there's nothing out in front of it other than that rectus sheath, unless you got some fat over it. But there's no muscle over that. So that's why somebody is, has low body fat, and then they really work out and they're ripped. You can really see the rectus abdominis. Probably not going to do the Erector Spiny group from this angle. I just don't like it, but you can see them. Generally, when I do Erector Spiny, it's a longitudinal thing like this. Okay. All righty. So far, so good. Don't forget rectus sheath. It's kind of like an aponeurosis. And don't forget the Linea Alba, the white line. Okay. So that's a really good picture there. You can really see nicely, all three. External oblique, internal oblique, transverse abdominis. You can see the rectus abdominis. You can see the white line, Linea Alba, and you can see the rectus sheath. All right. Diaphragm. I probably have to use a picture like this, but it is on the torso model. You're looking from underneath. So this is the central tendon right here. And some stuff goes through there, obviously. And there you can see a big old blood vessel, inferior vena cava, right here next to it, or partially going through it is this your esophagus is going down to your stomach, right? So anyway, this is for breathing, right? So that's the diaphragm. So that's fair game. Just don't forget the central tendon in the middle of it here. How does it work? Everybody thinks the diaphragm just cuts straight across. That's not true. It kind of makes this little curve here, right? And so when it contracts, this moves down like that, and that increases your, the volume of your thoracic cavity. So basically, you're going to decrease the pressure inside your thoracic cavity, and then the air is going to suck in to your lungs, right? Look up physics. It's Boyle's law. P1 V1 equal P2 V2, something like that. It's been so long. Anyway, talk about pressure and volume. Okay. All right, I think we're good. So the one thing we left out, external intercostals and internal intercostals. intercostal ribs, right? So same thing. The externals are running like a V. See them right there? Like that. And the internals are running like an A-frame from the middle. Okay? So don't call these obliques. These are up in between the ribs. So these are called intercostals. These help you breathe. And, quiet respiration is mostly your diaphragm. Right? And so let's just keep it simple as far as inhaling and exhaling. It's kind of the opposite of what you would think. The external intercostals, right? They help you to inhale, where the internals help you exhale. So it's kind of the opposite of what you would think by the names. So externals make you inhale and internals make you exhale. Okay, so I think we're good. Wow, that went pretty quick. So 25 minutes. So we'll go ahead and shut this down and I'll post it for you. Okay.